Hi, my name is Miguel Rios, and welcome to my creative critical reflection, which will include 4 questions. How do your products use or challenge conventions, and how do they represent social groups or issues? My film product is one in which it has a unique twist and usage of sci-fi. Now, why do I say it has a unique twist and usage? Is because of its genre conventions, and it is used in terms of its plot and design and composition to make up an overall development of the mise-en-scène in my film and its opening. But some genre conventions aren't used as heavily as in other films. In a way that we see an example of genre conventions and how mine does not conform to these genre conventions is how it is common in other sci-fi films like Terminator, Star Wars, and Back to the Future. We see how there's a common theme of a futuristic or dystopian setting. And the time period in my opening is concurrent to the present, and it is supposed to appear that way through the design and composition, through its makeup of equipment and props, and through its setting, that everything that is happening within the relative time period to which we are living in now. And the purpose of the situation of it taking place to the same time period as we are currently living in is so that it can be concurrent with societal issues that we are facing today. The societal issues that it exposes is its plot, and the plot exposes how authoritative figures, especially in today's world and society, isn't perfect, and they are human too. And as a result, they are prone to mistakes just like we are. And this plot of the government agent and the scientists within my film that propose a risk to society through creating a gem accidentally, I like how this exposes a deep underlying issue of how authoritative and government figures need to be held accountable for their mistakes, just like everyone else, like you and me. Now, with the underlying issue that I have mentioned, it is more important that government and authoritative figures are responsible for their actions and held accountable for their actions and mistakes, because we have seen too many examples of how leaving it unchecked can cause issues, risk, and societal issues. We see this with North Korea, how they have a led dictatorship from Kim Jong Un, and we see how his dictatorship has caused bad relations between other countries, nuclear risk, and we've seen how their issues have caused distress among the community and society of the world. And we have seen it with Russia as well, how they have threatened nuclear war and fallout before, with how they ripped up the treaty that they have between the U.S. and Russia with nuclear arms, and how they have especially been acting aggressive with their actions by invading the Ukraine and causing havoc, devastation among their society, and also causing death. And we have seen it with China as well, with how they handle their government in a highly unchecked manner. And we've seen this with a couple things that we have seen across the United States, with like how the air balloons flew over the United States, and how it was supposed to be a surveillance balloon, and how China has not been regulated or had not been checked on for their accountability on that issue, and they have not issued any blame or accountability towards themselves, but rather blame and point and blame on us. And we have seen this too far in many of today's world, how different governments interact and how accountability has led to issues among people. Russia, they hadn't been accountable, and therefore many people had to suffer in the Ukraine. And also within the country of Russia themselves, they have to almost be in a recessive state of their economy due to the lack of accountability that Putin has over his people and his rule. I feel like the lack of freedoms that all these countries have may be due to the underlying issue of accountability that needs to be highlighted, which is not highlighted often among many of the countries of today. And is why I chose to highlight in my opening of my film, I chose this issue to expose through my examples of the scientist and also of the government agent. I chose those two characters to portray issues of how their consequences within the story are caused by their mistakes and their actions, and how there is a lack of accountability among them. Firstly, question 2 is, how do your products engage with the audience and how would they be distributed as real media products? And question 3 speaks to how did your production skills develop through this project? I find this to be a very interesting question because when you speak to engagement, and it speaks to how the audience experiences the film. And so this automatically makes me think of what I incorporated in the film to create mise en scène. The certain feeling that the audience experiences of sci-fi, the certain scientific part about it, I think the audience had a great grasp of how to experience that, not only through my opening film, but through the diegetic sound. But because of how everything was put together, the effects, in order to incorporate it, the film was made to emphasize the display of design and how design was used in the plot. For example, I think the scientist scene is one of the greatest parts of my opening because we see a character, the scientist. He is unnamed. He is simply just called the scientist, and we see his hair. It's crazy, right? We see props used around his table, like the glass vase, the bottles of chemicals, and we see the defibrillator mask on the table, and we see the red liquid that he steers the gem into. And I feel like as the audience experiences this, I feel like they have a great idea of seeing how the plot is supposed to go in a chronological order, and seeing how the plot incorporates the plot, the costume, the hairstyle, everything about it speaks loudly to how the audience is stuck and fixated on what's going on. Without the props, there would be likely not much to experience. The gem, the liquid, the surrounding really made the audience think during that section of the scene with the scientist, like, wow, he's really in a laboratory. So I think that part was really engaging, and we see how the transitions from the scientist, from his part of the scene to the government agent scene. As we see, he's walking towards a house, and he walks into the house, and it speaks to the situation that is caused from the scientist and the government agent and their faults. And the the most important part about it was the plot. The plot was really engaging, and the plot would not have been engaging without the usage of composition and design. We see how there's a certain focus in the framing to where there's an open scene all the time, to where the focus is on the character in that particular scene, but as well, there is a certain notice that audience can hint to, seeing the different props, the different things around, and how that overall adds characteristics towards the characters, towards the government agent, his glasses, his suit, through the way he walks on frame, the way that the frames are centered towards the characters, towards their movements. When the scientist goes and moves his head towards the paper, the sheet behind him, all these movements, the way that the characters are blocked through blocking, and how I think there's a deep composition in the frames. It allows the open scenery to just fill up the audience's mind, and I feel like that is how the product engages with the audience. They are totally engaged with the product through the composition, the design, and the mise en scène. The mise en scène is built up. It's built up because there's a situation in the plot of the gem getting out of control, and we see it progress from okay, what's going on, to okay, this has gone worse. And this is all expressed through the chronological movement of the scenes, through the way the scenes are made, and I think as well through the non-diegetic and off-screen sound. They speak to how the frames and through the certain sections, how they change, because the scientist scene, we see this kind of like sci-fi type music that is like almost alien-like, at least how I describe it, and I think the audience can hear that and personally make that contributed to the scene, because without the non-diegetic and off-screen sounds, I think without that the composition isn't fully there, and I think the composition was an important factor to the audience being engaged. The sounds in the background fill up the void that would have been missing if there was no music in there. It adds a characteristic and it defines how the scenes are, and I think that's why the audience would be engaged with the product and the final finishing touches that I made to my product of the opening scene. So I think the movie, the opening, was a great part to be engaged with the audience. The music, the soundtrack, the non-diegetic sound, that is what added a layer of depth to the composition. I think that's what allowed it to have deep composition within every single one of the scenes. And I think it was important that towards the end, with Rodrigo Rio, the character that picks up the gem at the end, he sees the gem, he picks it up, and one of the things that you notice throughout the scene is the change of mood, because we are not dealing with the adults, with the perpetrators who made the mistake, the issue of creating the dangerous gem, but now we see the consequences of that, which is Rodrigo Rio, a random kid in his backyard, just going around and finding it upon accident. And I think for that, it highlights the issue or a difference within how everything went so far. How we see how there's a misleading step of the government agents and the scientists' actions, because we see the music is cut off, right? There's a suspense build up, and now we see a result. And I think all of it is so well to how engaging the scene is to the audience, and that is how the mood and the layers of composition and design are layered to where the general audience can notice and recognize the mise en scène. About the distribution of the product, I would choose to exhibit the film in theaters and release it to auxiliary markets through Blu-ray and DVD for the benefits of extra revenue and for the product to live past its lifespan and to decrease piracy. As well, I would choose to promote it online due to the extensive reach that it has, and I would promote it through online social media pages and television to allow the multiple audiences, multiple age groups, and people to hear about the film before it is released in theaters. Now I'm going to start steering towards the direction of question 3. Question 3 mentions, how did your production skills develop throughout this project? To the usage of props, it was something that I had never really done as often with other projects I've done throughout ACE Media Studies and this class, but During this final project, I felt as if I got a better understanding of the usage of props because it was one of the components of design that made my film improve and wouldn't have been the same without it. The props provided detail. It solidified things like the setting, and throughout the production phase of the film, it was apparent that through many takes that I have improved because each time we have refilmed, me and my crew and I, the blocking of the props on the open frame was better for the on-screen space, and there was noticeable differences of effort, meaning and usage of the props for mise-en-scène. And the most prominent example were the parts of the opening scene, including the scientist. We had the respirator mask, also known as defibrillator mask. It could be used either way. The gem, the glass objects, the hydrogen peroxide, and the medical alcohol, which used and created the impression that the character shown was a scientist in a lab. And also, those props were used to tell a story and show what the scientist was doing to the gem, as we saw him stirring the gem in red liquid. I can say that I have learned how to use props to tell a story and learned how to effectively use them to design a setting. Question 4. So, how did I integrate technology in my project? Technology integration was a big part of my final project and used in the production and post-production as well as my pre-production phase. And accessibility wasn't an issue because despite my equipment labeled in earlier posts saying I was going to use a Samsung Note 20 for filming, when it came down to shooting, my crew and I had some scheduling issues where we found out that how limited we would be in terms of time. So, a compromise had to be made. So I compromised to using my phone instead of my dad's Note 20. My phone is the Samsung Galaxy S10e. Despite compromising camera quality, colorization was dramatically better on my phone in comparison, so when we filmed it, it wasn't as big as an issue as I thought, and later through testing camera shots and takes, we found great settings that made me realize there wasn't much quality I was missing out on, and it wasn't going to drastically affect the presentation or the composition of the film. During post-production, the phone used for filming had an advanced editing application, which I have been used to for years. I've been making videos using this platform and this type of editing software since I was a kid, making YouTube videos. And using this editing software, an app called KineMaster, has stuck with me throughout time, and soon I mastered my skills more through previous works and through the works of this project. The editing was a process which was all done possible by technology, and made me realize how if technology was not as advanced as it was now, movie producing and filmmaking wouldn't nearly be as popular as it was today. Think about it. With platforms where you can upload videos and to which the online internet has endless capabilities of where you could share and access media in all of its types and forms, it's no wonder that movie production and movie sharing in the filmmaking processes would be made easier. Editing with the software KineMaster was familiar to me already. However, I greatly learned from this experience with technology of how to use my knowledge learned from Ace Media Studies and how to use it efficiently to create continuity for making every scene match and follow a chronological order of events to present a story to the audience. Thank you for reviewing my creative critical reflection of my opening scene for The Awakening Gem, and I hope you really liked it. It was very fun making this and making the final project, and I hope to do many more things like what I have done in this project, and I hope that you enjoyed, and I hope in the future I will be able to benefit from these skills and use them in more places.